Well, this is Bill Havens, part of the life story for the Havens family. I'm going to go back farther than the other kids, of course, and try to tell my part of it. Naturally, since my part has always been woven right in with the other kids, they got to come into it now and then. But to start off, I think the year was 1927. We were living out north of Bushnell, Nebraska, on a farm out in the Flower Field community area. One of the first things I can remember out there was that I tried to sneak up on a little calf right after a big rain out in the place there, and he was out in the corral, and I was going to sneak up and pull his tail, and that little rascal let me have it right in the belly with both hind feet and landed me in a big old mess of cow manure and mud and water. Needless to say, I got drenched off over at the horse tank, and screaming and howling, Ma got me all cleaned up. We lived there for, I guess, 3 or 4 years. I was just a little squirt. And Mom had a buggy with her driving horse she called Queenie. And everywhere she went, why, she drove Queenie in the buggy, and I was sitting in the back on a ball of binding twine, and Dolores, she sat up there. Mom kind of held her while she drove. Dad, he had a spring wagon that he always pulled with 2 mules, and he'd drive, and Mom would sit on the seat holding Dolores, and I was sitting on my usual ball of binding twine in the back. Then in the wintertime, we had a bobsled that Dad hooked the mules on, and we went everywhere on that bobsled. And naturally, I was in the back, wrapped up in a big old comfort with my ball of twine. Never did seem to get away from that ball of twine. Then later down the line, Jean was born up there, and then Dolores, she got her ball of twine to set on, and she'd driven us over to Grandma and Grandma Ackerson's one day in the buggy, and she was holding Jean and driving kind of with one hand. And Dolores and I, we were in the back of the buggy sitting on our ball of binding twine, and doggone old Queenie run away. She run, I don't know how far, but she run down between the fields, so she really couldn't hurt anything, but she was really running, and Mom was trying to hold her with one hand and hold on to Jean with the other, and old Queenie, she run right up to the windmill and stopped, and we all bailed out of that thing. Nobody was hurt, though, so it was all right. Then that one year, Daddy got a really good crop, so he hitched up the mules to the spring wagon, and we all went into Bushnell, Nebraska, and by golly, he bought a brand new Model T car in there. Boy, was it pretty. And I was just big enough that I could stand up on the seat and peek out the isinglass window. So him and I, we drove the Model T Ford home, and Mom was mad because she had to drive the mules with the springboard wagon home. And when we got there, she insisted Dad was going to show her how to drive that Model T Ford. Well, he showed her all right, and she kicked him out and took off in the Model T Ford and come back and run it right into the corner of the house, and tore heck out of the corner of the house and tore up the front end of the Model T Ford, and that kind of ended her driving days for a while. Then I think it was probably the next year that the big hailstorm hit Dad, killed a bunch of his stuff, his calves and that stuff, and I think it ruined his crops. And then at the same time, the Depression hit. So he gave up on that farming at that place, and we moved out to LaPorte, Colorado. Well, we didn't have any place to go when we got to LaPorte, so we moved in with Amos and Faye Ackerson out north of LaPorte on the ditch bank there, and all of us kids, we just had a ball out on that place. And we stayed there for quite a while, and then we moved over to Bellevue, where Dad went to work for a farmer over there called Lasnowski. And I don't remember how long he worked over there, but I do remember that he got disgusted with the whole business one of those days, and then he moved back to Mitchell, Nebraska. Back there, we moved out north of Mitchell on the old Frank Logan farm, and Dad worked for Frank Logan out there for quite a while. And let's see, backing up, I think it was at Bellevue where Short was born. Yeah, that's right, Short was born when we was living at Bellevue. But over on the Frank Logan place, it was all sand and sandburrs, and us kids, we had a good time up there. This is the place out there where Dad pulled the big land leveler up in the yard with the horses and stopped them and went in to get a drink of water. And in the meantime, Mom had given each of us kids a piece of chocolate cake, and Gene went out and sat down on the middle bar of the land leveler and was sitting there eating his cake, and Dolores somehow or other hollered, "Get up," and the horses, they walked ahead and dumped Gene over backwards, and he rolled up in the dirt, mouth full of dirt and chocolate cake, and then the land leveler rolled him up in the back part of it and rolled right over the top of him. And needless to say, you couldn't tell what color old Gene was when he come out of that mess. This is also the place where Granddad Havens come out and stayed with us for a while, and there was a hole under the house where we could get under there, and out on the front porch, it was one of them big veranda type front porches that Mom had an old cast iron rocker out there and had a little cushion in the seat, and every afternoon old Granddad would go out there and go to sleep and sit there and snore for all he was worth. And so Gene and I, we found one of those little telephone magnetos and some wire and crawled under the house, and Gene poked the wire up through a crack in the boards, and I kind of threaded it through the pillow there right along the top. And that afternoon when old Granddad come out to take his nap, he sprawled out in that chair, and the wire was too short. We had to get under, Gene had to get underneath the porch there to crank the crank, but it started lightning out there, and hey, Granddad was asleep, and old Gene, he'd give that thing one hell of a crank. He didn't have to do it that hard, but boy, he did. And Granddad, he jumped straight out of that chair, went tearing in the house, told Mom that lightning struck him, and Gene, he was pulling wire for all he was worth of getting out of there. If that old man would have found out it was us, he'd have killed both of us. It was at Frank Logan's place when Uncle Claude Havens come to visit us. At that time, Claude was a hobo, and somewhere he caught the 7-year itch, and he give it to all of us kids. God, was we itching. And Mom, she talked to the doctor, and the doctor told her to use a rough scrub brush and soap and water and brush off all of those scabs and put lard and sulfur on them. Well, I'm telling you, I've seen kids circle a room before, but I never seen them circle them halfway up on the walls and never touch the floor. Man, all the screaming and carrying on, but by golly, we got rid of the itch. When Dad was working in the field, he always carried a beanie shooter with him, and when he'd see a cottontail real close, he'd pop him with a rock, and then he'd hold the cottontail up and let his white belly show for us kids, because we'd see the horses stop out there. And then we'd have a nice young cottontail for supper. But this one day, Gene and I, we were scaring the hell out of the horses, and Dad, he seen us from down in the field, and he held up his white gloves, so we went tearing down there because we thought he had a cottontail. And we got down there, and he glared at both of us, and he told us, he says, when I get home tonight, I'm going to beat the hell out of both of you. And for scaring them horses like that. And boy, did he beat the hell out of us. We was down every day down there. In the summertime, me and Gene's job was go down to the cornfield and cut some fresh corn and carry it up for the hogs. So this one day we was down there, and the dogs come running right down along the edge of the cornfield chasing a rabbit, and old Gene says, I'm going to hide and I'm going to grab him as he comes by. So he got all down there and all hunkered down, and here come the rabbit, and Gene give a big lunge for him, and he missed the rabbit, and the dogs run over him. And then he decided that he had to go to the potty, so he pulled down his pants and went, and the mosquitoes was really bad. And he got through, and then he wanted me to pull up his pants for him while he slapped mosquitoes, and I wouldn't do it. So he was screaming and yelling, and here come Dad. And Dad, he grabbed him and pulled up his pants, and then beat the hell out of me for not helping him. Remember, it come winter time down there, and oh God, it was cold. A lot of snow on the ground. Folks didn't have any money. Hell, nobody had any money. It was in the Depression. And we had about a mile to walk to school. So Mom, she would take gunny sacks and wrap them around our feet and tie them so that keep our feet a little warmer while we walked to school. Then once in a while, Dad could take the team and wagon and haul us into school, but God, that was worse than walking because it was so damn cold in that wagon. I remember Dolores, she hated those long handles with a purple passion. And in the morning, just before she'd get to school, she'd stop and roll down her socks and roll them long handles up above her dress hem so people couldn't see them, and then roll her socks back up, and then go on into school. If Ma would have caught her, she would have killed her. Well, I don't remember much more about the old Logan place except that Dad had 3 different cars while we was there. One was a Star, one was a Whippet, and then he bought a Hudson, a big old Hudson. And that Hudson is the one that we loaded everything on Arkansas style and headed back for Colorado. Dad got a job over in the number 10 area just west of Fort Collins for a guy, if I remember right, his name was Theodore Whistler. And we lived in one of his old houses up there. Well, they had these violin lessons in Fort Collins for 5 cents a lesson, and they furnished the violin. So I was elected. I was going to go to town and I was going to take violin lessons. Problem was I had to walk both ways, and hell, it took me nearly all day just to get in there and back. And along about the 4th lesson, the nickels run out, so that ended the violin lessons. Then we moved from number 10 into Fort Collins on the corner of Loomis and Cherry Street. This is where all of us kids caught the smallpox and had to be quarantined for a long time. It's also where Mom caught the double pneumonia and darn near died on us due to some stupid chiropractor for a doctor. And this is the place where we were playing, and somehow or other I run around the corner and grabbed a hold of Mom's big china closet, and I upset that damn thing, and I think I broke everything in it. And I went out to the shed out behind and was feeling so bad about it. I was sitting there bawling, and I figured Dad was going to come out and just literally tear me apart. But for some reason, he never did show up, and I guess I got forgiven after a bunch of years. But I sure tore up all of her dishes, and I really felt bad about it. And we moved from there out north of Fort Collins at the country club. I think I was in the 7th grade at that time. And we went to Plummer School, which was 3 miles away, and we walked back and forth from there. And of course we picked pick fruit because it was a great big orchard there. And Dad got a job for the county of $100 a month. We were really rich all of a sudden. Well, we thought anyway. But this is also the place where little Roland Roy drowned down in the flume on the Eaton Ditch that come from Long's Pond down into the Eaton Ditch, and kind of took a chunk out of our lives. And my dad's cousin Cliff Havens happened to be there visiting at the time, and all the men got abreast down in the Eaton Ditch after they got the water shut down. And they started wading up it, and Cliff found little Roland Leroy in the water about 1.5 miles from where he went in. And then they determined that he didn't drown at all, that he hit his head on one of the crossbars of that flume where he went in, and that killed him right on the spot, so he didn't drown. Well, we stayed there, and I graduated from the 8th grade. I think the year was 1938. And then Granddad Ackerson and I, one of the other kids, we built a house in the south end of Fort Collins on a lot, kind of a shack more than a house. And when the folks, we all moved into there. And I continued school there in town. But I was age 15 at the time, and I'd about had a belly full of the whole works. So I was walking down the street one day, and an old rancher stepped out of the beer joint down there in Fort Collins, and he says, "Hey kid, you looking for a job?" And I said, "You darn right I am." He said, "I'll tell you what, if you want to go to work for me, I'll give you $10 a month in your board and room." He said, "If that's satisfactory, I want to talk to your folks." And I says, "Come on, I'll show you where I live." So he went over and talked to the folks, and they all made a deal, and Mom, she went in and packed my clothes, and I went out and got in his shiny new 38 Chevrolet pickup, and we drove up to the ranch 30 miles west of Fort Collins at Livermore, Colorado, between Livermore and Virginia Dale. God, I couldn't believe it, $10 a month. I hadn't seen $10 in my whole life. So I went to work for him, and we worked 7 days a week, daylight till dark, naturally. And then to take a bath, I had to use his horse tank. Well, the horse tank was a big concrete outfit that was set on a slope in the bottom of a draw, and the overflow come out the bottom of the horse tank, the bottom end and up at the top there, and it splattered down on some rocks. Well, that was my shower, because I wasn't allowed to put any soap in the horse tank, so I'd go out there and stand under the lower end of it, and I'd wash off out there in the dark, because you had to kind of hide so old Mrs. Darris couldn't find you. But old Stiffy Darris and I, we just had a lot of fun with all that work. He only had one eye, and he rode a damned old horse that had the same eye missing, and they was always missing cows. So I'd always have to ride on his blind side and pick up everything that he couldn't see to get him on into the place. Well, I worked for old Stiffy off and on during school for the next 2 years. And I learned an awful lot about cows and horses and how to work in general. But the winter I turned age 17, I decided that I was going to join the CCCs, because, gee, they were paying $30 a month, of which $15 went to me and $15 went to my folks, and boy, that was a lot of money. So I joined them, and I think that was in February or March, and I don't remember for sure, but at any rate, it came harvest time around the country, and a guy offered me a job, $3 a day to shock grain. And so I got a hold of Mom, and she wrote me out thing that I could go to work, and had this guy sign it, and the CCCs let me out so I could go to work for this guy. So I went out there and I shocked grain till that was all done, and then I joined the thrashing crew for old Halsey Roberts, and we thrashed grain for, I guess, 2 months there. And then I was out of a job, of course, but up at Albin, Wyoming, the potato cellars were opening up, and for sacking seed potatoes and sorting them. And so I went up there and I got a job as a sacker. Well, I had to sack potatoes and then carry the sacks back and put them on a big stack back there, 100 pounds each, all weighed and tagged. And at 17, I was having a hell of a time. I could hardly lift 100 pounds, let alone carry it back there 50 yards on the run. But I finally got onto it, and I spent the whole winter in the spud cellars up there. And then that played out. And in the spring I went back down to Fort Collins, and I went to work for a farmer down there, old McIntyre. And I worked for him all summer till the harvest time come on again, and then I kind of did the same thing all over again. And I did that until the spring of 1944, and of course in the meantime I helped the folks on getting their crops in and out. But in the spring of 1944, Gene and I got an itch to join the service. So Gene, he joined earlier than me, but when I helped I helped the folks get the crops all in, and it was on June the 6th, and I went down and joined the Navy. Well, they shipped me up to Farragut, Idaho for boot training. And then I went right on to the Hawaiian Islands and took jungle warfare training over there. And then we built a freight train while I was there that was used to haul supplies back and forth to different depots there on the island. As soon as we got that done, they shipped us right out for Guam. It took us 3 weeks to get out to Guam, and we got there and got our tents and stuff unloaded and set up, and took bulldozers and dug big trenches down on the beach and pushed the Japs in it. And of course, when the first storm come along, washed all that sand away and washed all the Japs out to the ocean too. But I run a road grader most of the time in the service there, and of course we had our combat patrols once a week. And Tom, if you'll look in your pictures, you'll see a Jap 2-man sub sitting on a concrete foundation. We captured that thing. He beached himself during the night, and we took an old Army 6x6 and let out the winch and hooked on him and dragged him up on the shore, and took the 2 Japs to the prisoner of war compound. And then we got a crane and the lowboy, and we loaded their sub on there, took it over to our compound and got it all set up. But it was so hot down there. Our clothes all mildewed in the barracks bag, and they just rotted away. We had to throw away barracks bags and all. And the clothes that we wore were just cut off dungarees and our shoes and a baseball cap. And you'll see that in some of the pictures that once in a while on Sunday we had an old shirt that we would put on. But that's the way we lived, and we all had that jungle rot because it was so hot and steamy down there. And the Seabees never could find a cure for it, so we had that all the time we was down there. But after the war was over, we had it quite a bit easier. I run a road grader all the time during the war. Well, I run it after the war too, maintaining roads. But we got to come home and everything we had was mildewed and rotted off of us, you know. So they put us aboard ship, and we had our two old mildewed, rotted blankets, and we used them for our coats. Damn near froze to death. Got back to the States, and it was raining and cold, and all we had was our two old blankets wrapped around us like some old Indians. We got up on the dock, and where was all these famous bands that was supposed to meet us and all that stuff? I tell you, Tom, there wasn't a soul around that place. But we got loaded on buses and headed out to that Treasure Island. Got in the barracks, and God, it was nice and warm in there, and they had brand new blankets on all them bunks, and we immediately stole blankets and got them wrapped around us, and some of us went to bed trying to get warm. But the next day they took us over and they issued us all new clothes and started mushing us out, and that took a couple of weeks, and I finally got out on May the 6th, 1946, or June the 6th, 1946, and got on a train and headed for Colorado. Boy, was I glad to get there, Tom. Well, I bought an old car, because you couldn't buy a new one, and I went to work for that Colorado, Wyoming gas company up there, north of Wellington, and I worked for them all summer, and Norma Jean and I got married. But then they decided that the only way I was going to be able to keep my job was move to Denver, and I decided, God, I'm not going to do that. So about that time, Fritz and Al Ackerman come down to see me and offered me a job up on the ranch. So I decided that rather than go to Denver, I would just take it. So Norma Jean and I, we moved up on the Buckeye there on the Ackerman Ranch, and I started riding for them. Well, I rode for them for the next 2 years, and then Al Ackerman and I kind of tangled one night, and I quit, and while we were there, Rocky was born and died, of course. And I quit them and moved up to Cheyenne. And right away I went to work for the railroad, and I worked for them for 2 months because this was in the middle of the winter. And I decided I didn't want any part of the railroad, so I went down to the Carpenter's Apprenticeship Hall, or the Carpenter's Hall, and took out my carpentry apprenticeship. And I went to work as a carpenter at that time, March the 10th, 1950. And I worked for 2 years for A.K. Morley and Sons. And they made me a foreman, but I was only a second-year apprentice. And the carpenters, they wasn't going to work for no apprentice. So old Fred Bush, the foreman, he took me down to the union hall, and I come back about 2 hours later with my union card. Man, I was a full-fledged carpenter in a hurry. And so then I took my crew and started working. And I worked for just about every contractor in Cheyenne at one time or another. As fast as one had run out of work, I'd make a phone call and go to work for another one. And from that old carpenter time till Norma Jean and I got our divorce, then you can kind of remember those days because you were big enough. I think you were 7. And you can kind of remember what happened from there on in.
Leon, McLaren conversion.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.